My superiors unfairly accused me, then dismissed me, and in response, I sought intense revenge. I set off a series of events that resulted in a divorce, a prison sentence, and several deportations. But before we go any further, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Press the bell, because this is a long journey. If you stick with it until the end, you'll discover how my accusation and accidental dismissal from work set off a chain reaction, leading to a staff overhaul, with several managers being fired or transferred to other restaurants. The general manager was fired and faced a divorce, while one of the managers was investigated by the FBI and ended up in prison. Additionally, several employees were deported. Now, let's go back to the beginning. I worked at a fancy restaurant owned by a large corporation with several different brands. It was about 3.5 years until I was finally released. But before I get into those details, allow me to share a little about my role there. I played a variety of roles from day one, deciding to learn as much as possible. I was persistent in seeking out new departments, starting as a server and progressing to roles such as hosting, bartending, event support, catering, and deliveries. My goal was to be available for as many hours as possible, receiving around 12 hours, varying depending on my role. Eventually, management noticed my ability in a non-tipped position and decided to try me out as an unofficial supervisor for the catering and delivery team. Although this meant fewer hours, I negotiated a pay increase of 50 cents an hour given the additional responsibility. I wasn't looking to accumulate money, I just wanted to pay my bills and still have some to enjoy life. Living in taxing Chicago, Illinois, survival was challenging. However, I was a person of simple pleasures and could enjoy things for long periods of time. Money was not an issue, but high turnover in management resulted in new managers being uninformed about the details and importance of hours for workers in different sectors. At some point, we realized that our current general manager was going to be fired and replaced by a new manager who promised to be a star in the business of improving restaurants. We looked for his name and found it as the first search result on Google. However, instead of a glowing analysis of his work ethic or his incredible ability to improve the operation of a restaurant, we are faced with a mug shot and a filed police report for repeated domestic violence. This information would become crucial later. Let's call him Harvey. Just as Harvey arrived and began implementing changes, one of our best managers quit. She refused to work with him and, like an oracle, warned us about possible misogynistic comments and harassment, predicting that he would eventually destroy the work environment. Shortly after her departure, Harvey began replacing our current managers with people he had worked with in the past. All but one manager were changed. Let's call him Frito. Frito, the kitchen manager, was there since the beginning of my journey there. His stance seemed to adapt to the values and ethics of his superiors. Although I recognize his survival instincts, I see him as someone who seeks to please and betray, depending on the circumstances. Harvey never replaced our department manager, so we were left without constant supervision, unless you count my role as a supervisor. We didn't have someone always monitoring us on how things should be done. Despite some setbacks, our department functioned well. Without a specific manager, I was often called upon to resolve issues that required a manager's approval. Frito was the one who answered these calls, but over time, the new management team came to see him as the manager of our department. However, the hourly staff continued to recognize me as their supervisor. This meant that whenever Frito tried to implement disruptive changes, the team relied on me to mitigate the issues or negotiate with him to maintain the method that had proven effective over the months. Frito and I often disagreed about the importance of hourly workers to our department. He insisted that we should rely on tips, like the servers, but most of our orders came from Grubhub, which doesn't include tips. We received few deliveries, and tips, when they came, were minimal. In a meeting with Harvey, Frito, and the entire department staff, presented as an opportunity to air our grievances without fear of retaliation, tensions between us reached a fever pitch. The employees acted as mentioned about how Frito was trying to reduce hours, even though he was not our actual manager. When the possibility of hiring a new manager came up, the team suggested I take on the role, as I had already been supervising them and managing operations smoothly over the past few months. It was me that management consulted when preparing schedules, as I was aware of workers' commitments to school or family life. I noticed the moment it was suggested that Harvey and Frito would make the decision about my fate. Although they didn't say it directly, I could catch the look exchanged between them, and I knew instinctively that my days in this place were numbered. My role was just to make things happen one way or another. Several promises were made about not cutting hours, ensuring that they would not send most people home early. They stated that only one person would go out to clean and close, considering the size of the department. However, about a week later, they started sending most people home early every night. We tried to negotiate, suggesting cuts, but always guaranteeing at least 2 people to close properly. One night they tried to send everyone but me home. At this point, we were dealing with post-catering event cleanup, a monumental task for a single person. When Frito tried to implement this, I approached and reminded him of the promise made during the meeting. He looked me in the eye and asked me to stop complaining, threatening to find someone to cover my shifts if I continued to insist. It was clear that this was an attempt to sabotage my job. I chose to back off, starting cleaning and staying late, resulting in overtime pay. I received a report about this, but I refused to sign it, explaining to Frito that I would not be able to complete the cleaning alone before the end of my shift. I was allowed to leave without signing the document, but only because the HR rep present was not aligned with Harvey's cronies. On the day I was fired, it's important to mention that I always arrived at work an hour early, taking advantage of the offer of free soup and bread, a small advantage given the high costs of living in Chicago. Every day, I arrived at work an hour early to enjoy the soup and bread before my shift. One day, as I walked into the kitchen to get my soup, one of the line cooks informed me that there was a canceled dish available, which Frito told me to give to someone. He assured that Frito had already paid and that it was free to anyone who wanted it. Coincidentally, it was my favorite appetizer, so I luckily got the food free of charge. Shortly after, upon arriving at my stand, Harvey and Frito approached asking if I had registered an order for that food. I explained that the line cook presented me with the meal, explaining that it was a canceled order that Frito had already covered. Frito was perplexed, claiming to have no idea what I was talking about. Harvey then claimed that this was theft and ordered me to finish my meal and leave the premises, declaring that it would be my last meal there. I tried to explain again, but they were deaf to the explanations. When I returned to the kitchen with them to speak to the cook, I discovered that he had already left. With no choice, I gathered my things, said goodbye, and went home. When I told my colleagues in my department about what had happened, it caused surprise, anger and, above all, sadness to see me go. I decided to stop by accounting on my way out to collect any tips that might have been left. Taking advantage of the moment, I set my phone to record and put it in my pocket with the camera on. Despite the video being completely dark, as it was in my pocket, I managed to capture a muffled recording of Harvey and Frito's voices discussing how everything had gone according to plan, and that they had been trying to get rid of me since the meeting with the department. When I knocked on the door, they fell silent before opening it, asking what I was still doing there. I claimed my tips, which they collected in the safe and gave to me. Despite my growing anger, I decided not to cut the bridge at that moment. Perhaps I could detonate it later. I offered a handshake, thanking him for the opportunity, and left, making sure to take my phone out of my pocket and tape the restaurant's facade with signs showing its name and logo. Working in restaurants, you learn to always protect yourself, a valuable lesson for most jobs. Something told me I would need all of this later, especially if I were accused of theft. I wanted the ability to prove it wasn't true, which became crucial in future job interviews. That's how everything started to become chaos on the train ride home. I sent messages and posted in local Facebook groups, reporting that I had been laid off and was quickly looking for a job. Before I even got home, I had already scheduled an interview for later that day and was offered a job just 5 minutes into the interview. However, after reviewing the details, I realized it wasn't the best option for me. So, I chose not to accept the offer and looked for other opportunities. I found a job that offered a considerable salary increase compared to my previous job, and best of all, I wouldn't have to deal with customers. It was an audit position for a logistics company. However, during the interview with the manager of this job, he mentioned that he had called my old place of employment and spoken to the general manager, Harvey. Harvey claimed I had been fired for theft. Fortunately, the manager interviewing me asked for more details, allowing me to pull out my phone and find the recording. I asked if the voice in the video matched the person he spoke to on the phone, and that was enough to confirm that it wasn't a fake video. He heard the two managers admit on the video that they had set me up, watching until the end when I showed the front of the restaurant with the logo and name of the manager interviewing me, Dean. Dean hired me immediately and asked me to send him the recording I made. I thought that would be the end of the episode. About 7 months later, after I had settled into this new job, Human Resources sent a welcome email to all new team members, giving facts about them and including photos. Thomas, a former co-worker from the restaurant where we worked together at the host booth, was among the new hires. I was happy to see him and greeted him, questioning why he left the restaurant. Thomas explained that he did not leave of his own free will, but rather was fired because the company was under investigation. It all started with an email attaching a video filmed from inside my pocket, reason enough for the company to launch an internal investigation. He was surprised that I hadn't received any information about this. Since then, there have been several attempts to contact me via an old email I used when I applied for the job at the restaurant. I received at least 24 emails requesting a discussion about my employment and termination, but I never responded as I simply didn't care anymore. Additionally, I have since changed my number, making it more difficult for them to contact me by phone. Thomas went on to explain that before the company sent someone to investigate, Harvey and Fredo spoke to my old department, trying to bribe them with small pay raises to spread a corporate story about my incompetence at work and failure to fulfill my duties. The day the corporate auditor showed up, there was a quick stampede of people from my old department, who quit in front of the company representative, Audrey. They made sure to report Harvey and Fredo before leaving the scene. The first blow was given in front of Audrey, and the second occurred a few days later, when she showed Harvey and Fredo the recording that started the entire episode. They vehemently denied it, but there was no doubt about Harvey's voice. The video not only captured their voices, but also revealed their thoughts as we shook hands and had an amicable separation. Something they had already bragged to Audrey, thinking they looked better for parting on good terms. However, this was not the second blow. It happened when it became clear that they needed to be separated. So, Audrey reassigned Fredo to work at another restaurant owned by our parent company, temporarily demoting Harvey to manager. It separated them, once an inseparable evil team. The pressure of the investigation seemed to push them to the limit. They ended up fighting publicly on Facebook, in a post on the company page that has since been deleted. Thomas explained that in the post, Fredo was pictured on the restaurant's page, and Harvey made a passive-aggressive comment about how Fredo shouldn't even be in the photo since he had moved to another restaurant due to misconduct. Fredo saw this comment and responded something like, "Well, at least people Google my name. I don't come across as the guy who punched his wife." Harvey responded sarcastically, mentioning the episode where Fredo cheated on Janet's wife, not her real name, but Janet was the officially assigned supervisor for my old department after I was fired. Fredo countered that Harvey didn't try with half the waitresses, and they all have stories about him trying to get involved with them. The post was deleted, but not before Audrey, the auditor who was officially attacking them, saw it. The third blow came the next day, when Audrey began interviewing the heavyweight female staff and bartenders to see if any of them could confirm that Harvey tried to harass them. They were all interviewed separately, and several of them had similar stories. All the girls confirmed that Harvey had tried to take advantage of them, offering to patronize them if they stayed up or stayed after closing to play with him. As a result, Harvey was fired. However, the worst was yet to come. Audrey, the auditor, was not just an ordinary company employee. She was the former regional manager for this area and had personally hired Harvey's wife as general manager of another restaurant in town. She called the restaurant where Harvey's wife worked and told them everything she learned from the all-female team. We later learned that they had divorced because Harvey tried to cheat on her, even after she gave him a second chance after he physically hurt her. We don't know what made her give him a second chance after something like that, but she sure didn't give him a third chance after the episode with the line cook who gave me free food. Audrey interviewed him, and at some point he admitted to being an illegal immigrant. Audrey had her file with an Illinois ID and social security number on file, which confused her as she pressed him for more information. We later found out that Fredo had some connections and ran his own miniature black market, forging social security cards and IDs for the illegal immigrants he hired. For at least 4 years, a salary reduction took place, something that turned out to be a crime with serious public relations implications. Feeling cornered, she decided to alert the authorities. The local police department sought assistance from the FBI due to evidence that exceeded local jurisdiction. Fredo was arrested and, under pressure, revealed the names of those who were involved in selling social security cards and IDs. Although it is not certain whether all were handed over, he named around 14 people, resulting in the deportation of at least half of them. Thomas, when he was fired, revealed that it all started with his dismissal. The recording he made was not sent to the company, but to the lawyer who hired him. This lawyer, the wife of his boss, forwarded the evidence to the legal team at the corporate headquarters of his former job at the restaurant. The initial intention was simply to get two individuals responsible for his problems fired, but the unfolding situation resulted in accusations of harassment, revelations about managers cheating on their wives, mass firings pending investigations, staff reviews, and an FBI investigation into activities related to the black market in counterfeit documents issued by the government. There were also at least half a dozen deportations, possibly as many as 14. This story, which began as a quest for self-preservation, ended up triggering a series of events that became an unintended nuclear revenge. It was not a direct quest for revenge, but an attempt to protect himself that unexpectedly set off a chain reaction. The narrator did not even directly seek to harm them, all he wanted was to have evidence to guarantee employment in the future. However, the outcome of the situation led to a series of unexpected and significant repercussions. Let me know what you guys would do in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. In the latest episode of HistoReddit, we explore an incredible story of unexpected twists and turns. Starting with an unfair dismissal, the protagonist only sought to protect himself, but ended up unleashing an involuntary and nuclear revenge. From a pay cut to the black market in forged documents, the plot unfolded into a series of extraordinary events. If you like this unusual revenge story, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the HistoReddit channel for more fascinating content, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any episode. Share your opinions in the comments below, and let's explore more surprising stories together.